Okay, I'm here to talk about the Myers family reunion. The Myers family that I know, the Myers family of Branchville, South Carolina. It turns out it was a very large family, and it started with two people. My grandfather, who was Dave Myers, and my grandmother, who was Della Myers. And those two, when they got married, and they got married very young, they ended up with 13 children. And I'm actually told by my Uncle Claude that there was 14, but that one died as an infant, but we never knew anything about that until very recently, I think. So the Myers family, as far as we are concerned, started with my grandpa Dave and my grandmother Della. I am one of the 68 grandchildren that they had. I am Alexander James, nicknamed Count. My mother is Reaver Myers James, and that's how I'm part of Myers family. And so, of course, I'm part of the James family too. And everybody, both families were from Branchville, South Carolina. As far as we knew, and we were very close, and there was a lot of us, and the cousins were very close, and we knew our grandparents, but we didn't know anybody beyond that, and we didn't bother looking beyond that, and we didn't have Ancestry.com or anything like that around at the time, so I guess we accepted that as the Myers family, starting with, as I said, my grandparents. So they had the 13 children. It was 8 boys and 5 girls. And the boys were George Myers. And one of the funny things, I guess one of the things we found out, they didn't always name the first son after the father. And in my grandparents' case, they didn't. Their first son was George Myers. And their second was Dave Myers. So they named the second one after Grandpa. And they went on to have other boys like Frank. They had Bill, we called him Uncle Bill, but his kids keep saying no, his name was Willie. And then we had Uncle Marion, who we called Mac. We had Leroy, who we called Shorty. And he was, of course, a long way from being short. He was one of the tallest ones, but everybody called him Shorty. We had Oscar, who never, I guess all the 13 except one, so therefore it was only 12 that came north, and one of them stayed in the south, and that was Oscar. And then we had Claude, who was the youngest. And I'm not sure I got them all, but I think I did. Now, the girls were Ivana, she was the oldest, Ivana, Della, and you notice in this case, Della is named after grandma, but she was the second daughter. So you had Ivana, Della, Reaver, Beulah, and Albertha. So those were the 5 girls. And between them, as I said, they had 68 children. 3 of them had 9 children. George, the oldest one, had 9. My father had 9, and David, the second son, had 9. So I guess they set the standard, and from there it went down a little. It went down to 6, and 5, and then finally down to one of them had no children, who was Shorty, or Leroy, and one of them had 1, and that was Claude. He was the youngest one. He just had a daughter, and that was it. But fortunately, even when we came north as part of the Great Migration from South Carolina, we lived pretty close together. In fact, my family lived with my Uncle Dave's family when we came here. And they had 7 children, because they did have 9, but 2 of them had died as youngsters. And so they only had 7 at the time we moved in with them. and we had 9. So there was 16 children and 4 adults. And we all lived in one apartment. And it's something they call a coal flat. So we had to provide our own heat somehow. But getting back to the question that we wanted to answer, why did we start with our grandparents? If you were to ask any of the grandchildren, I don't think they would even think that there was anything beyond that.